Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with the industry's biggest names. I am your host, Alan Seals, and our guest today is Lorin Latarro, who is a performer, choreographer, director, neuroscience junkie. I had such a good conversation with her. She equates the feeling of dancing to flying, actually, and chasing a natural high that has led her away from performing from the stage to now being a choreographer, and then, of course, taking that final step here. Well, I guess not final. You can do anything you want, but going from choreographer into directing, which is new for her. Her current project, of course, is Mrs. Doubtfire, which just went on hiatus. These are strange times. Everybody, please stay safe, get vaccinated, but support your local theater and wear your masks at all times so we can get back to some sense of normalcy. Okay, rant over. Before we get into the episode, please join me on Instagram and Twitter at theater_podcast, on Facebook /official theater podcast. I'm getting back into creating transcriptions for the episodes to make them more accessible. So show your support and help us cover the cost of that at ttp.fm/Patreon, Patreon. Every little bit helps. And now everybody, please enjoy this episode with Lorin Latarro.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Our guest today is a director choreographer who has an amazing array of 14 Broadway credits as a performer, including Fosse, Kiss Me Kate, Man of La Mancha, Movin' Out, Spamalot, A Chorus Line. I could go on. In the last decade, she's added a whole slew of Broadway choreography credits to her name, including Hands on a Hard Body, Waitress, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, one of my personal favorites. And now, of course, Mrs. Doubtfire. She directed the recent production of Is There Still Sex in the City? And is also a self-proclaimed speed reader and neuroscience junkie, two things I am very excited to talk about. Lorin Latarro, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Hello, thank you. So happy to be here.
So, of course, this is a theater-related podcast, so let's talk about neuroscience. Yeah, I love the science behind, well, specifically the neuroscience behind theater, right? Because I ask people all the time, what attracts them to theater and what is it about the stage and movement, and there's music and there's the vibration and there's energy, and you can get as spiritual and, as Jen Colella told me, hoo-hoo as you want to be about this. But there is science behind actually all the stuff. You didn't think we were going to actually talk about neuroscience, did you? So you're a neuroscience junkie. What does that mean, and how does that relate to theater for you? Actually, I want to start with this weird topic.
Well, I mean, I'm obsessed with neuroscience as it relates to the body. My big thing was just vascular and synaptic neurogenesis as it relates to dance, was sort of how it was my way in. And dance has like the most neurogenesis possibilities of all the worlds of exercise, because you're both thinking about what you're doing and you're using cardiovascular, you're getting your heart rate up. So it's like running only does one of the two, yoga only does one of the two, dance is one of the few things that does both. So that's how I got into it. But I am obsessed with the idea of how a collective experience changes your brainwaves, and how bodies in the theater actually start to breathe together and laugh together, and, synapses that fire together, wire together. And then you walk out of that theater more connected to the people you're sitting with.
This is fascinating to me. I now have a whole new realm of neuroscience to dive into, because something that I've missed about being in quarantine and being in COVID and Broadway being shut down is the collective journey that a giant room full of strangers will travel on together. When you're being taken on an emotional roller coaster with the person next to you, and you're crying because they're crying, but are they crying because you're crying, or laughing, or vice versa, whatever the case is, right? So the fact that there is neuroscience behind all this is truly, truly fascinating. I love that that you've brought it into the dance world as well. Have you done any actual studies on this, or is this just kind of a hobby?
No, I actually almost left the business to create a business about.
No kidding.
Yeah, I was obsessed. I mean, I met with Eric Kandel, who's sort of one of the fathers of neuroscience, and I married a brain surgeon. Partly because I was so interested in this kind of experience, and I did some Parkinson's. Lots of programs with Parkinson's at Rutgers, and I'm still involved.
Wow, you're such a smarty pants. I think you need to get involved with some research that Anthony Veneziali is doing from Freestyle Love Supreme. He's been working with somebody in a research department to scan his brain. I don't know if he's still doing this, but he was doing this last year when I talked to him, to scan his brain when he's freestyling and when he's not freestyling. And they've proven that all the stuff about the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, basically that is the region of your brain that turns on and off, that maintains the devil on your shoulder, as I call it, that little voice that says, I'm not good enough. And so when you are freestyling, that part of the brain is inhibited.
Right.
And therefore you feel more comfortable. You're more apt to connect with strangers, to be more open, receptive. And to pair that with movement and dance with what you're doing, I think the two of you could really do something very cool.
It's very exciting. I'd love to connect to him. Yeah, man. It's just, you can call it being in the flow, but I think everybody on earth has experienced, even for a few blessed moments, when you're just not, when that part of your frontal executor is shut down and you're just going.
I love that. I really think you and Anthony could do something very cool when it comes to movement study, like freestyling dance. Mm-hmm. I wonder, oh man, yeah, Anthony, if you're listening, let's expand the study, because I wonder if this part of the brain has to do specifically with speech, or if it's just inhibition in general, right?
Right. Probably in general. I mean, speech probably lives in a different part of the brain than this.
Yeah.
In an image, but it would probably work.
I'm fascinated. Okay, so let's get back to you. You look like you're about to say something else.
No, I love it.
Oh, okay. So you specifically, of course, you love the neuroscience side of it, but why start out in theater? You have a bunch of Broadway credits to your name. Where did you grow up? How did you get into theater? And why not take the neuroscience path?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I grew up with two older brothers and a dad who were all doctors. So there was no way I was doing it, even though it was sort of the family ethos. And in first grade, I won a dance contest. And that was it. I decided I was going to be a dancer. And by fourth grade, I decided, yeah, I know, it's crazy. In fourth grade, we went to the Nutcracker, and someone said, that school over there is like the Fame College. It's the best school. And I said in fourth grade, I'm going to go there. Well, I did. So I just decided I was a dancer. I never grew out of that fantasy, and here we are.
Well, so then, looking back, as your adult life now, knowing what you know about the brain and chemistry, looking back at that point in your life, do you recognize what it was emotionally, or even, I mean, emotion is just a chemical, but or chemical responses. But do you have any idea? And there's no right or wrong answer, but do you have any sort of purpose, scientific understanding of the purpose behind the path you chose?
I think I always felt the most free when I was dancing. To me, it feels like being a bird. Like it feels like how a human can fly. And it was never about fame or money for me ever. It was always about chasing that feeling.
Was it like chasing a high, sort of like
it's
chasing this
like
natural
high,
yeah,
but it's very personal, and I love the feeling, and it sustained me for many, many years.
So then your husband, being a brain surgeon, right, is the two of you seem like a yin and a yang that work well together. Does he talk to you about the patients and operating on people's heads, and you come home and you're like, well, so these are the dance moves I did that helped my brain today?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, opposites attract. And he loves theater. I mean, I knew he was the one for me when he had Jesus Christ Superstar blasting in his car, and he could sing every lyric. Like, who are you? And it sucks when I have a hard day and he's like, well, did you do brain surgery? I mean, that's really the worst. But other than that, I mean, he really loves theater, and I enjoy learning about movement disorders, which is what his specialty is. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, my dad has Parkinson's, so this is sort of a personal thing for me to understand all of this, because like that seems. I talked to my dad about this, right? To be literally, if your brain is still functioning cognitively, then you're sort of trapped in this vessel that you can't do anything about. So how do you fix that? How do you change that?
Yeah, my husband does DBS surgery on Parkinson's patients. That's what he does.
Interesting. Have you done anything with movement therapy for Parkinson's patients?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was saying. We did a little bit of Parkinson's movement, and Mark Morris, years ago, before I met him, I used to, I volunteered to do the dancing for Parkinson's patients. They still do it at the Mark Morris. I mean, I don't know with COVID, but they have a giant Parkinson's dance movement program there that's free.
Oh, interesting. So if anybody who is listening has Parkinson's, or for like me who has family or friends or relatives with Parkinson's, is there anything that you can say now to have people sort of do at home as an exercise?
Yes.
Exercises to help this?
Exactly what I said in the beginning. Exercises that you have to have your brain involved and your heart rate up. Like walking on the treadmill and then having someone throw you a ball and having to catch it. Or going to a dance class and having to learn a pattern of 8 moves so that your brain is activated, as opposed to just walking. Do you see the difference?
Yes, because one is passive, I guess, is a good way for it, right? Like it's routine.
Exactly.
The synapses that have formed to teach you how to walk have calcified.
Exactly.
And they don't change.
Right. So you want to change it up so that your brain is surprised. And that creates synaptic neurogenesis, which is what you want to do.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. That's I'm going to make sure that my dad listens to this episode, because this is really helpful.
Yeah.
So getting back to theater then, grew up, want to do theater. So you decided when you were in 4th grade, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to this college. And then you have this successful career. 14 Broadway credits is nothing to sneeze at. And then was it a switch where you're like, I don't want to perform anymore, I want to be on the creative side, or did it sort of transition naturally?
Even when I was performing, even when I was at Juilliard, even when I was in high school, I was always choreographing. I choreographed the show choirs and the cheerleaders. And then at Juilliard, I was always choreographing my own dances and choreographing operas for Frank Casero and choreographing the actors, 12th Night on roller skates, whatever it was, I did it. And then while I was on Broadway, I was always choreographing opening numbers of Gypsy of the Year, which we now call the Red Buckets, or the Easter Bonnets, or, assisting choreographers. I assisted Kathleen Marshall and Stephen Hoggett and, Rob Ashford. I mean, you name it, I was in the room with them, Sergio Trujillo. And that's where I spent my days. So I would spend my days assisting Casey Nicola, and then at night I'd go do my show. So I was always sort of in the room choreographing. And then little by little, I just enjoyed the process more than performing. At a certain point, I just sort of started to feel, I just didn't love performing as much as I used to. For me, Moving Out, which is one of those up there, is one of the highlights. And then after that, I did about 4 or 5 other Broadway shows, but I never quite recaptured that experience of flying like I did in Moving Out. And so in that time after Moving Out, I was leaning more and more towards choreographing and creating.
Well, going back to what you said earlier about, keeping your brain reactive and elastic versus static, that if you're doing the same choreography 8 shows a week for, hopefully a show runs for a year or more, right? For a long time, then yeah, I could see how you lose the high, you lose the freshness of it. And so you want to move on to the next thing. So as a creative, as a choreographer, and now as a director, right, you get shorter snippets of focus so you can move on to the next thing more quickly.
Yes, it suits me.
Right. Is that a type A sort of control thing, or is that just a different part? Because we change, throughout the course of our lives, we change into multiple different people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just like learning. So whenever I'm in a new, with new actors, with new creative partners, learning about a new show, you get sort of delve into the whole world of it. I mean, Almost Famous, it was like delving into 70s rock and what it was like to be a roadie and living on the road as a young girl in the 70s. It's very different than living inside Mrs. Doubtfire. So, I just dig that. I dig like sort of jumping into one idea and learning as much about it as you can, choreographing it, physicalizing it, and then putting that in a box and then starting a new thing. Yeah.
You brought up Mrs. Doubtfire, so I want to touch on that for a second because I want to get to like what your preferred style is. We'll get to that, or where the inspiration comes from. But I want to say, and I've said this a couple times now on the podcast and other interviews, that the flamenco number near the end of Mrs. Doubtfire I have taken that with me, and that's going to be one of my favorite numbers ever that I've seen in any show throughout my entire life, because it's not only dancing, and Calvin Cooper is a good friend of mine. Love that dude. Calvin, of course, and the rest of the cast are great, but the choreography of the staging that has to happen with Rob McClure to get the prosthetics on and off on stage and behind the scenes and land this piece there on that beat and all that. It's phenomenal. So major snaps. I'm clapping. That's an amazing number that I think gets underappreciated because of the amount of moving pieces that need to go together. But then the other part of it is like that sort of thing is, there's so many different styles in Mrs. Doubtfire, but is flamenco sort of like that exotic sort of dance? Do you prefer that more? Do you prefer traditional or contemporary? Or like how do you approach all of this stuff, put it together? And then specifically for the flamenco number, when there's staging involved, how does that play in?
Oh my gosh, the flamenco! I'm so glad you figured out that how it was really. It took a very long time to make that happen, and I had to rearrange what was actually in the script to make it happen. And we sat there with a stopwatch, figuring out the exact amount of seconds it would take Rob to do these changes, and that's the amount of time we choreographed, and we would have to, do it so tightly. And I took flamenco at Juilliard, so it's got a special place in my heart. And and I brought in Ariel Rosales to come in and also really make sure what we were doing was authentic. And, this arm is better this way. This is, how about, and you could add 3 more sounds there, Lorin, if you really, so she was really a super, super help. But the song felt like flamenco. But I insisted I really wanted to do it. That is authentic flamenco dance, what you're saying. It is hard.
Yeah.
Those guys are working real hard. So there's comedy. And, it's a little hyperbolized in the way their outfits are. And in the singing, there's comedy. But the dancing is hyperbolized and funny at times. But it is the real deal. Like, that is flamenco dance. Right.
And then, so pulling in the staging, you said you had a stopwatch to time out Rob's changes. How many times, I guess, how many iterations of that number did you work through to get it to the final version that we see?
A lot. And the first version was really the dancers just standing there and figuring out what they had to sing. So that really it would be big picture stuff. And then once that was all figured out, then I went back in and choreographed the dance steps. But it was figuring out how the whole stage moved and what verses we had to put where. Because some verses are shorter than others. Mm-hmm. So we moved things around depending on if he was changing or not changing or when he had to stick his head out of the bathroom.
Oh, that's incredible. And so then going through then the rest of the show, is there... obviously this isn't like a dance performance of like the Nutcracker where it's all just one style the whole way through, right? So Broadway shows traditionally are a mix of styles. And how do you then approach, we'll use Doubtfire, for example, right? Because there are several different styles used in Doubtfire throughout the whole thing. And actually, is it Mrs. Doubtfire or Doubtfire? I've seen the branding
Mrs.
change.
Doubtfire.
Mrs. Doubtfire. Okay, Mrs. Doubtfire. The branding's changed a couple times.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Doubtfire now. How do you decide what style goes where? Is that an exclusively you thing, or are you working with other creative members and the cast even, or how does that roadmap get made?
The music. I mean, for me, the music sort of dictated style, and the Charity's big number, the 11 o'clock number, felt like I wanted it to be a little mix of hip hop and sort of, prop heavy hip hop, so it looked like, a combination of, something that feels like Broadway and then something that feels a little more present day. So that would be the most, I'd say, pop culture kind of choreography in the night, even though they're all dressed like doppelgangers of Mrs. Doubtfire. But like when he's trying to bake the chicken, the writers, I had to convince them to let me do a tap dance. They were like, I don't get it. It's going to interfere with the lyrics. And I said, please just let me try. So we built that giant dance break with Zane Marks, who's the dance orchestrator. And he, we came up with the rhythm and he added all those sounds to it slowly. So that was really built in the room, just us and the dancers. And then I finally convinced them that the tap would stay.
Oh, it's brilliant. I'm so glad that you pushed so hard for that, because that's another one of my favorite things. I mean, just pairing two things together to juxtapose, like literally cooking a turkey, something mundane for most of us, with this incredible tap number. I think, that's part of the magic of Broadway, right? And it speaks to the talent of you and the rest of the team who can see this sort of vision. We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. I want to talk about real quick COVID.
Yeah.
Sad face, womp womp. Because your both current projects took a hit from COVID. So is there still Sex in the City, which Candace Bushnell, who is the original,
Carrie Bradshaw.
Carrie Bradshaw, right?
Carrie Bradshaw, yeah.
Yes, the original Carrie Bradshaw. So she had this one-woman show that now will start touring, but it closed early because she contracted COVID.
Yes.
So how did you switch then again to start directing this?
I'd like to begin directing more and more. I've done a few shows in New York directing, and this came to me. My agent said, she's looking for a director. I think you'd be perfect. You guys should meet up. So we met up, and she ordered a Cosmo, and I almost fainted. So I ordered a Cosmo. And, this is a woman who influenced me greatly, right? I mean, she was what it was to be single, working in New York City. That's what my life was like in the 90s when I was at Juilliard and beyond. So her books, her way of being a feminist was sort of my roadmap. So to work with her was a dream come true, but we spoke the same language and we worked really hard. We took her life story and we decided which parts of it we wanted to tell. And it was a lot of fun. And the show's great. And the show will have a future life all around the world, really.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a preference yet between performing, choreographing, and now directing?
Well, I can tell you I have no desire to perform anymore. That is bye-bye. I am so done. I'm so happy to have everybody else be performing. And it's given me such freedom because I can choreograph on tall people, on short people, on men, on women. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's really, I feel like it's made me invisible and made the music and the dancing really take center stage. So I'm so relieved. And now I can eat dessert. And as far as choreographing, I love it. I'll always love it. And I would like to add directing to the mix when it feels appropriate. But by all means, I still very happily like to collaborate with directors,
Well, continuing down the COVID path, obviously Doubtfire just went on hiatus and they will come back right now scheduled to come back on March 10th, 2022. God, 20. I'm used to saying 2020 so much, which I think is, well, I guess it's not ironic. I was going to say, when was the shutdown? March 12th, 2020? Yeah, that's why I said 2020.
Right.
Yeah, so March 10th, 2022 is when it's scheduled to come back. So fingers crossed that's going to be fine and unimpeded. But the show was in the midst of previews back on March 12th, 2020. And now in 2022, it's going on hiatus. And the ups and downs of this massive, big budget show, so much writing on it, so much writing on the work that you've put into it. Like, what's going through your head now? And is it any different from before? Because before it was just like, okay, it's going to be 1 week. Nope, no 2 weeks. Nope, now a month. Now 5 months.
It's crazy. I mean, I think, look, I really think that what Kevin McCollum and Alchemation decided to do was really brilliant. And I'm really grateful that Roundabout, Todd Haynes and everyone at Roundabout said yes. It is unprecedented what is happening. Mm-hmm. They are giving a reprise on the rent to let us stay there and wait this out so that we don't close. And that is because everybody believes in the show. So as sad as it is to hear, it would be a lot more sad to close this giant show that should have a life, that should be making families all around the world feel closer. I mean, that is a perfect example of a show. You walk in as a family and you walk out as a closer family. And no matter what your situation is. Mm-hmm. And this is really a gift. And it's the only way forward for this show, because we need families. And right now, it's really hard to get, if you're a family of 3 kids, you're going to get them 3 COVID tests to come in. It's, it's very, very difficult right now. And it deserves to be seen by families. It really, really does. It's a gift for them. It's a big gift for kids of divorced families, especially. So I'm pretty grateful, as much as it's like, oh God, here we go again. But there are 2 things I want to change choreographically, so it's going to give me that. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, really? So they allow you to unlock the script?
I think they'll let me do these 2 small changes.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess we're not allowed to know yet. I won't ask. So the projects you have coming up now for 2022, hopefully, and beyond are Almost Famous with Tom Kitt and The Outsiders. And we've been hearing things about these for a little bit of time now. So are they still on track? Are they still planning to happen soon? What's going on with that?
I mean, I have no definite dates yet, but both are on track. I mean, both will be hopefully seen by the world sooner rather than later.
And are you getting any, from a choreographical, I guess, is that a word? A choreographical imagination, a choreography standpoint, right? Are these different, like working with different musicians, different composers, different directors, different bands, whatever the case is, right? Are you then coming to these episodes? Are you coming to these shows different from Doubtfire or?
Absolutely. Every show, the music for me and the story dictates everything. That's why choreographically, I'm all over the place. I loathe having a particular style. I find it so limiting. Once you codify something, I think it's weird that the same 10 dance steps can mean all these different things. So I really fight against that. And it's like, no, what does this character move like? What does this dance scene need? And because I've really done nothing else with my life but dance, I can pull from all these different styles because it is literally the only thing in the world I'm an expert in. I can't do anything else, but I can pull out flamenco when I need to, or Bharatanatyam when I need to, or, like Born on Ville Ballet when I need to, or Martha Graham when I need to. So it's like, that's what I do. That's the only thing I know how to do. So yeah, so Tom Kitt and I have worked so closely together on so many shows, The Visitor, American Idiot, Superhero. I really feel like I can speak his language and try and bring his lyrics to life. So Almost Famous, we did it at the Old Globe. It's really cool. It is just a cool show. And Cameron Crowe is just the coolest. And I'm very excited for the world to see it. So there's a template already done. And of course, we'll continue to change and make it better. But I'm excited about it.
That's very, very fun. I love that you're not, I guess, married to one style. I meant to bring up Juilliard because I don't want to skip over that. Obviously, that is a very good accomplishment. When you were training there, so I guess when you were training there, do they teach you a specific style, or do they want you to be well versed in all different styles, like as a dance major? Because when you're doing singing, it feels like you can either do like opera, or you can do classical, or whatever. Like singing is a little bit different, but I don't know much about the dancing world. How do they educate that?
We did a lot of different styles. My freshman year, we did flamenco, Indian dance, African dance. We had the bushwomen come in. They were amazing. And
wow.
And then, of course, there's like the Paul Taylor, and then there's Horton technique, and then there's Lamone technique, and Martha Graham technique, and then Pina Bausch came in and blew all of our minds. Yuri Killian, and then of course there's ballet every day, ballet. So there was a lot there. And then when I wasn't dancing there, I would run over to Broadway Dance Center to take, AC's class So Juilliard teaches all kinds of styles of dance. But, when it comes to singing, we had to go elsewhere for that. They were not interested in teaching dancers how to sing, which is still what I'm trying to change over there. I adjunct professor there now, and I want these dancers to be able to sing and act, so that they can do theater if they want to.
So among everything that you were doing, all of your shows, everything you're involved with, you're also an adjunct professor at Juilliard, but you also hold a degree from NYU Tisch, Film and Television in Directing Fundamentals. Where do you find time to do all this?
Well, I did that. I took a 2-year, I started before the pandemic, and then I whizzed through the pandemic. I got my degree in directing for film and television. It was
Is that
awesome.
what you want to do? Is that what you want? Like, you're directing, obviously, Broadway, but do you want to go into TV film next?
Maybe.
Are you putting that in the world? You're Oprahing that thought?
I mean, I think it'd be really cool. Look, I mean, it's like, look at Debbie Allen. Debbie Allen's directing TV, right? And she's sort of a huge idol of mine. So, I mean, I think it'd be fun. I think it's the same as choreographing. It's essentially, it's like making sure the picture inside the camera looks interesting and symmetrical if you want it to be, or warped if you want it to be. So I think it's actually quite similar.
Oh, that's such an interesting comparison, I guess. Yeah. So you're coordinating shots, you're working with your DP, of course, and then the editing. Yeah, you're coordinating the whole thing. You're choreographing the whole thing. I love that. That's a wonderful analogy. And you also founded, what is this? I'm looking for here in my notes. You founded artammo.org, which is Artists Against Gun Violence. Tell us about that.
Well, it happened after Sandy Hook. My sister and I wanted to do something. And the first call I made was to Tom Viola at Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. And I was like, let's do a Monday night benefit and raise some money for, one of these gun organizations. And I was the associate choreographer of Rigoletto at the Met Opera, with Michael Mayer directing and Stephen Hoggett choreographing at the time. So I was telling them, and Stephen Hoggett, who is a big, he's been a wonderful teacher for me, said, what, in his Scottish accent that I can't do, why are you doing it for people who agree with you? Take it to the streets. Make other people see it. So, and then it was like, let's do like something more visceral. So that's how we came up with this idea. My sister and I just came up with this idea to sort of chalk outline bodies in Times Square. And And then I just put posters up at every Broadway show, and I called a friend at every Broadway show and was like, "You're the leader of this. You have to get your team over here." And everybody showed up, and we had hundreds of Broadway actors do this thing on a Sunday morning before a matinee, and it got huge publicity. Like the Times picked it up, the BBC picked it up, everybody picked it up, all the news stations. Rachel Maddow, you name it. And then Bloomberg found out about it. And he was a big gun control advocate. So he sort of helped fund to do them in other cities. And I met Joe Biden. I went to DC and sat on a gun control roundtable with him at the time. He was the vice president. But I still do it. And I am disheartened by how little has happened in the movement. I feel like, politically speaking, people use it as a token to get elected, and then they don't do anything. And it's hard. It's just hard to do it on a state level. But the grassroots is working slowly. But that's what I do. So.
And there's flash mobs involved?
Yeah, you can go to artammo.org and check it out. And you can do one yourself. We help you get the permit, and we send you the chalk. It'll cost you nothing. But you
need a permit to do a flash mob?
Well, sometimes you need a permit to do it on a park or in a parking lot, but they're easy to get. I'm an expert in permit getting now.
And flash mobbing. Well, I want to be part of your next one. I'm definitely gonna check that out. You worked on Waiting for Godot, which is not a musical, but stars two of my favorite people in the world, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen. Two questions. One and two, A and B. What was it like working with these two guys? Because holy crap. And then B, it's not a musical. What are you doing choreographing not a musical?
Well, first of all, Patrick and Ian are two of the nicest people I've ever met. They are kind. Ian was so kind to the kids. We had kids in the show. He would take them out to lunch and he would get them gifts. I mean, they're really generous artists and like no egos. And the show, I've choreographed a couple plays. I did Dangerous Liasons, Curious Incident. I was the associate choreographer on, and Godot I choreographed. And the whole conceit was that they were vaudevillian actors stuck in time. So there was a vaudevillian sort of movement quality sprinkled in throughout the whole show. We had top hats, we had the, little tattered tails, tucks and tails. And Ian happens to be a phenomenal dancer. He's a tap dancer. So we had a lot of soft shoe. Yeah, he studied dance for years.
Wow.
So he really was great. So Patrick was always like, I need private lessons because I have to dance as well as Ian.
Oh, that's so much fun. So I mentioned Curious Incident at the beginning. I forgot about that. Yeah, that was, again, another one of my shows that it was just so outside the box, no pun intended, because it looks like it's staged in a box, that it was so outside the box and so interesting and different that still stands out as one of my most memorable plays I've ever seen. Yeah, I
mean, they choreographed to words, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they did. It's brilliant. It was just brilliant. I learned so much working on that show. It behaves like a musical.
Yeah, I love that. So let's wrap up here with 3 standard closing questions that I ask everybody on the podcast. The first one, just very simply, is what motivates you?
Telling stories, changing people's minds.
Love it. What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Just keep going. There's going to be ups and downs. You're not always going to get the job. Be kind to your collaborators and be kind to people also fighting for that job. It's just stay on the ladder.
And then last question, if you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Company.
Ooh, current gender swapped version?
Either one, it doesn't matter for me.
As long as it's got Patty in it.
I love this version. Marianne Elliott is a genius. I love it, but it wouldn't even matter to me. It's just...
Have you ever worked with Sondheim?
Yes, I did Merrily with Sondheim.
Oh, yeah.
And he was very good to me. He was very kind.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's what I hear. I never had the pleasure of meeting him directly, and I've always been 1 degree of separation. And I am just happy that I got to share this earth with that man at the same time.
Me too. I did Assassins too. I told him, and he thinks this is the funniest thing. I did IVF with my child. I injected myself in the bathroom of City Center, and he was sitting 10 feet away. And then the first show I came back 2.5 weeks after I gave birth, I did Merrily, and here I was pumping breast milk 10 feet away from him. And he was like, that's the closest to a baby I've ever gotten in my life.
Closest to having a baby. Oh, God, I miss that guy. All right, Lorin, where can we find you online?
I'm on Instagram at Latarro. I'm on Twitter, Lorin Latarro. I have a website, lorinlatarro.com. I'm on Facebook. So come find me, ask questions, come hang. Yeah,
we'll have all of your social media links in the show notes, of course. So everybody listening, check the show notes and connect with Lorin. And you can find me online at theater_podcast on Instagram and Twitter, at thetheaterpodcast.com. I'm on Facebook /official theater podcast. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening now. This has been edited by Well-Rounded Hoodlum Productions. Jukebox the Ghost provided us the intro and outro music, and Lorin Latarro provided us the wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.